Thank you, everybody, for coming here. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, but also some new faces. And this year is actually a very special year. Believe it or not, it is the 10th anniversary of the annual gathering. So I wanted to start with a question. Who was there for the first one 10 years ago? Stand up if you were here 10 years ago. I know there's a few of you. Come on, Andrea, you can stand up. Wow. Well, a special round of applause there. And that's not the only thing we have to celebrate. I met one of the participants just a few moments ago over coffee, and he proposed to his then-girlfriend, now fiancée, yesterday, and I'm happy to say the result was a positive one. So that's fantastic news. So as you can see, I have my guest here, Ernie Garcia, the founder of Carvana. We're going to speak very, very shortly. But let me just quickly start off with the schedule for this morning, and then we'll get straight to it. So I'm going to speak with Ernie for the next hour or so. We're probably aiming for about roughly 45 minutes of Mountainside chat, I should emphasize. These things often get called fireside chats, and as you can definitely see, there's no fireside here, but there's definitely a mountain. I'll see if I can, I don't know if this is going to work, but it's a very snowy day. Do you get that, Achim?
Everyone's getting it.
Yeah, well, so this is definitely a bona fide mountainside chat. So that's going to go, and then, so after about 45 minutes, I'm going to open it up for questions for you guys. Also, I think there's a few people watching on YouTube, so we may get a few questions there. Then we've got half an hour coffee break where we can all connect with each other. And then we're going to come back at 10:30 where Andreas, my partner, will join me on the stage and we'll take our annual Q&A, which is a highlight for both of us in the year. And then 12 o'clock, we're done with the formal side of things, and we're in one of the most beautiful spots in the world here. It's a fantastic day, lots of snow. So we're going to head up the mountain. There's different hiking groups. The hiking groups are being coordinated, I think, by Andreas and Joel. And there's also a skiing group. There's a skiing group, and we have our resident powder hound here, Nate Chesley, who's going to be coordinating that. So, thank you, Nate. So we do have a room reserved for us at the Trübsee, which is the first stop if you go up with the cable car. But please don't feel like everyone should go there at the same time. We're a very large group, I think about 250 people. So the restaurant will be totally overwhelmed if we all go once. So some people probably want to get away immediately after we finish. Some people maybe want to hang, talk a little bit. So that's totally okay. So hopefully we don't all arrive at the same time. And ditto, I think, with the skiing and also the hiking, probably unrealistic. We can all go together. So feel free to break up into groups and whatever makes most sense for you. And then at 6 o'clock, we're going to be back here. All these chairs will be taken away. Instead, there'll be cocktail tables and a buffet. And many of you have been here before. You know the drill. In the evening, we all hang out with each other. And there's a lot of opportunity. Everyone speaks to everybody. A lot of great connections happen. And for me, that's one of my favorite parts of the weekend. Then tomorrow is the Emerging Manager Day. The backstory there was, when I started my fund 20 years ago, I wrote a little memo after about 5 years explaining how I did things. And as a result of that, I sort of got a lot of young men and women reach out to me asking about how I started my fund and, looking for advice for themselves. And what I realized was rather than try to speak to everyone individually, it was much more valuable for them to bring them all together here. And they'd not only get to hear from me and speak to me, but also, more importantly, probably connect with each other. So that's the idea of the day tomorrow. But I'll talk about the schedule at the beginning of the session tomorrow. So, Ernie, welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome that you made it here. And, the place I wanted to start with our conversation is, tell us a bit about your background, where you came from, a little bit about your youth, and, maybe some formative experiences.
Oh, my youth?
Yeah.
I got in trouble a lot. Okay, I'll try to give a quick version. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. Whoa, there we go. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I think sports were a big part of me growing up. That's kind of what I thought I was going to do until I realized I wasn't that good. Then I went to school. I didn't consider myself like a smart kid, so I got into Stanford, which blew my mind. And I definitely consider myself like a jock, and I did okay on the test. And then I got into Stanford. I thought that was amazing, and went there. That was an incredible experience that I'm extremely grateful for. I think I met a ton of people, and it gave me visibility to a lot of really ambitious people that were going to do ambitious things later on, which I think was influential and helpful. I went and worked in New York for a couple of years. Mike McKeever, who's sitting out here in the audience somewhere, runs capital markets for us, and we worked together. And I loved that. That was in 2006, 2007. Where I worked was a place called Greenwich Capital that at the time I believe was the second or third largest kind of processor of mortgages into the securitization market that was out there. And so it was a really cool place to sit and watch 2007 and 2008 happen. Right around that time, I actually had some family reasons to move back to Phoenix. My dad had started a company before. My dad was always pretty entrepreneurial, and I think my story inside of my own head was that I was going to do my own thing, and I would never work for my dad, because I kind of knew that when I met someone who worked, for their family, at least there was a little bit of an asterisk in my mind about how much they had really achieved themselves. But in Phoenix, there's not a lot to do, and I had to be back there. And so I had to swallow that pride and work for his company, which is called Drive Time, which is basically kind of a subprime automotive retail and finance company. I'd kind of grown up around that business, working in it from the time I was 16. But there just weren't a lot of really interesting companies in Phoenix, so I started working there and started another company, in an effort to achieve my self-identity that was totally separated. It was a company called Ludarang, and it was kind of like a Yelp meets Groupon type of concept at the time. And we made it absolutely nowhere. I ate through all the money that I had earned so far and was down to zero. And then launched Carvana inside of Drive Time. And so far that one is working, but we've done our best to make it look like it wasn't a couple times.
Let me stop you there, because we're definitely going to get to Carvana. But there's legendary stories about your sort of competitiveness and ambition. Where did that come from?
I think the root of that is probably insecurity, but I don't know. Like I said, I grew up playing sports, and I was definitely like a kid who cried every time I lost, like to an embarrassing extent and for an embarrassingly long time, including high school. If we lost in football, I would sit in the back of the bus, and everyone knew they weren't supposed to talk to me because I would want to fight them. But I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. That was just there.
Well, we have a common friend, Cliff Sosin, and he told me a story once how he challenged you to a sort of a chin-up competition, and he started off with 15, and then he said you started, and by about the 7th, you were sort of really struggling, and he's like, okay, I've definitely won this, but out of somehow you managed to get to make it to 15 as well.
I'm not going to lose to Cliff in anything, no matter what. Not going to happen.
So not everyone here will be as familiar with as maybe some others about Carvana. So why don't you tell us what Carvana does and the problem they solve for people?
Sure. So I'll try to be brief on this one too, but I'll probably struggle. I think buying a car, especially in the US, is definitely viewed as a tough experience, and I think the root of the difficulty of that experience is that I think the way that industry has evolved is it's a inherently very complex transaction. You're buying a car that is variable in its price and its features. You're probably trading in a car. That's a complicated thing to get right. You probably need financing. You probably want a warranty. There's regulatory components. And so the way that industry has evolved over time is basically the OEMs hired a bunch of franchise dealers. These franchise dealers kind of outsourced many parts of the technology stack to 30 or 40 different third-party software providers. The OEMs require that the dealers make certain investments in their facilities, both the real estate and the facilities themselves. And then because they're all using the same third-party software providers, they all have to hire the same people. And so that evolution to handle the complexity, where it got broken into, I think, many different horizontal kind of slices, led to highly undifferentiated underlying cost structures. And so when you kind of take highly undifferentiated businesses, they either have to have, of which there are many, there are tens of thousands of dealers in the US, you would expect for them to either have very low profits because they're all selling a somewhat commoditized product with the same underlying cost structure, or they need to find some way to take that transaction and take the components of the transaction that a consumer may not fully understand and find ways to monetize that. And I think dealers have gotten very good over a very long long period of time, having a customer come in and figure out sort of like, are you elastic to price? Are you elastic to rate? Are you elastic to trade in value? Are you willing to buy a bunch of different products? And they're good at putting that basket together in a way that takes 4 hours and makes the customer feel like they don't really understand what's going on, but also leads to profits that are pretty good in retail despite how competitive it is. And so in our mind, that was the root of that problem was very deep. There wasn't a way to make the customer experience better unless we actually fixed the underlying cost structure and built a different kind of experience. And we also thought that the experience hadn't evolved, hadn't really adopted modern technology and adapted to modern customer preferences because it was so hard and it was so kind of ingrained in all of these different systems. And so we thought if we build a more automated process that's fully deterministic and that leverages all of these cool online tools and reduces real estate expenses, but then gives customers a 7-day return policy instead of a test drive, that like the math of all of that should work. And I think we didn't appreciate just how hard it would be, but I do think the premise was right. And I think as a result, we've been lucky enough to be really successful. And I think by most measures, we're now enjoying outsized success, and I think we're doing it in a way where there's not a lot of other businesses that can easily compete with us because we've been investing in it now for 12 or 13 years super aggressively to try to build that system that we didn't appreciate just how hard it would be.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive deeper into some of those challenges you had to solve to sell a car online, but I want to ask first though about the origin story, which I guess is a typical question to ask in this sort of thing, but I'd like to dive deeper and like, when was the exact moment you came up with the idea for Carvana? Was it something you always in the back of your mind wanted to do? I guess you grew up in a car family, maybe it was something at the time when the web was getting bigger, so maybe it was something always in the back of your mind, or was there sort of like an apple hitting you on the head sort of moment?
I suppose so. I think the origin was a desire to do something that I thought was going to be like an interesting business that we thought we could find success at, and that kind of led to Luderang first, and then
when exactly would this have been?
When would that have been?
Yeah.
That would have been 2010, give or take, 2009.
Yeah. So after the first startup had failed, or around?
No, so sorry, Luderang was around 2009,
okay.
And basically we didn't even get all the way through Luderang when we started Carvana. We were like halfway through Luderang because at that time, again, like that combination of like insecurity and arrogance, you think you can do everything at once, and so Carvana was like another idea that was popping into my mind at that point in time because I felt like I didn't understand why automotive retail was such a disliked experience and it didn't seem fundamental to the product. And I was, working in drive time. At that time, I was basically, going to drive time at whatever it was, like 8 in the morning, and then I was leaving at like 4 or 5, and then I was working on Luderang until 2 a.m. I didn't have kids at that time, so I could just kind of work all the time. But was starting to realize that Luderang wasn't working, and I think a big part of why it wasn't working is because we didn't know anything about that business. And so, I think when you're starting a business, you sort of want to not know too much because then you think that all the ways things work are the ways they have to work. But if you know nothing, you spend all kinds of time trying to figure out things that are obvious to other people. And it took us a long time to figure out obvious things.
There's a sweet spot of not knowing too much, but not
I think there is. Yeah. And so anyway, so we realized that, Luderang wasn't working great. Carvana was something that was another idea that had popped into my head, and we wanted to try something that we sort of knew something about. The CEO of Drive Time at the time, because I was constantly throwing big ideas out to him, he asked me to go to an auction, which is the way that kind of dealers buy cars in the U.S., and he's like, will you please find a way to save $1 million? At the time, Drive Time was selling 50,000 cars per year. And he's like, I just want you to find a way to save $1 million. I don't want a bigger idea than that. Just like save $1 million with high confidence, and then let's implement that. And so I went to the auction, and I won't bore you with all the details, but watching the way the auction functioned made me like much, much more confident that selling cars online should work. And so I came back and I put together a 20-page...
Because it was so dysfunctional, or what made you think that?
Because the dealers that were buying cars were sitting there and kind of maybe opening the door and feeling the paint line and then walking away, and then they were paying $20,000 car for a car they were going to sell to a consumer. And the fact that it took them all of 13 seconds to get the information necessary to make that kind of investment, and then they were going to sell it to a consumer, made me realize like so much of the information gathering that people value is not actually that valuable, and you can also massively mitigate the need for it if you recondition cars. And so I went to him and
Super interesting, because I always assumed the sort of the idea came from more the sort of the customer-facing buying a car side of things, but it sounds like it came more from the idea of there's a lot of inefficiency in just the way a car is sold. Bought at auction. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it was both. So it was those two ideas coming together. It was, why is buying a car such a bummer? And then that was that whole thought process of how the industry had evolved and how you could fix it, but you had to build something fundamentally different. And then I think it was going to auction and seeing thousands of cars trade in this like very simple way, very quickly. And then also looking at that, it's like kind of fun from a market's perspective and saying, there's $20,000 cars that are trading with basically $500 of fees between the wholesaler and the purchaser of the car, with probably $500 to $700 of additional expenses just to get the car to this place. So you've got like a 5% transaction cost for something that people are looking at for 2 seconds and buying. And you're like, that would never work in any other market. And so the whole system just felt really, really inefficient. And so then we put together a deck, or I guess I put together a deck that was like 20 pages long called Online Auto Sales, and showed it to the CEO and asked for $50 million, and he cussed me out. But he did ultimately give us the money.
Yeah. I mean, just jumping ahead a little bit here, but it sounds like right from the beginning, the idea of data and the intransparency and efficiency was like core of the idea, and that was, 15 years before AI came along, but I mean, that must be an incredible tailwind for the business.
I think...
this is jumping way ahead.
Yeah,
it just seems to fit here.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, I think... I'll try to put that in a slightly different, but like, if you think about like, what is the purpose of physical retail versus online retail as a general matter? And I think as a general matter, it's about information collection. It's like the reason that you want to physically see something, you see it, you touch it, you smell it, you can like, see how heavy it is in your hand, whatever it is, the thing that you're buying. But that's like the actual value you get from going and, physically going to a store versus e-commerce, which in general would be more cost effective. And so I think in auto, it was interesting to just think about what is the actual information a consumer's getting. And I think consumers tend to value the idea of a test drive, and it feels like a responsible part of your diligence that you should do when you buy a car. But I bet you if we surveyed everyone in here, if we like did a blind drive test of 10 cars, they couldn't pick them out. Yeah. And so a lot of that was perceived value, not real value. Yeah. And so we kind of believed that if we could find other ways to replace that information, whether it's the 360 car spinner or condition reports or a 7-day return policy or whatever it is, other ways to convey that information that would give people confidence, you could do it way cheaper than the traditional way.
Yeah. So a few times you've said we, and I know you have an incredibly loyal and core team of people around you. Who are they, and when did they sort of start entering the picture here?
So I think I could expand that we pretty wide, but I'll say the first couple were Ben Houston, who's our COO. He's someone I went to college with, and I think maybe it's interesting because he grew up in a house. This is like more origin story stuff, but I think it's interesting to think about how people are formed. He grew up in a house. He had 3 brothers. His parents both worked 2 jobs, and his parents are great, and they're like fun to be around, and they very clearly love their kids a ton, and they also were never around because they were working all the time, and so they basically kind of like raised themselves. And I think it's super interesting to look at that because he's probably the most effective human being I feel like I've ever met in my life, as far as he's like really smart and effective in a boardroom. He can think through any problem. He could, he'll kick your ass in a bar fight. And he's,
you met at university?
Anything in between. We met at college.
Yeah.
And then he went on to be a lawyer because that was, his internal story was, okay, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to be a lawyer. That's how I'll be effective. And then I called him and actually asked him to start to be the CEO of Luderang. And he came over and did that and then transitioned over to Carvana afterwards. But he's an incredibly effective person, and Carvana would not be successful without him. And he and I have very different approaches to the way we think about the world, which I think has been helpful in finding the best answers because we are both very comfortable arguing as well. Ryan Keaton was one of our other co-founders. Met him actually through his wife that worked at a third-party marketing company, and we were kicking off the idea for Carvana, and she was like, you should meet my husband, and now he runs brand for us and has been around since the very beginning. Mark Jenkins came over relatively early. Mark Jenkins,
CFO.
He's our CFO. He was an academic. He got his PhD at Stanford. I met him there when he was doing some research and was using drive time data to do that research. And then he went and was a professor at Wharton. But his brain power and throughput is like completely unmatched. And so I basically begged him for years and years. I didn't even care what he did, but I begged him for years and years, like, please come over and do something with us. So I think he's also like pretty non-traditional. We've had lots of short reports over the years, and some of them have pointed to him as being a non-traditional CFO, like that's a problem.
I'm a non-traditional fund manager, so that's...
Yeah, no, I don't understand. The idea that you're supposed to have some like very traditional background, I think, is a misplaced thought. But anyway, so he's someone else that was around from the very beginning, and there's many more.
Yeah, is it fair to say a lot of that core team cut their teeth on the first startup, which didn't work out, but it kind of bonded you and helped?
I think Ben and I did, and then Ryan and Mark were both kind of, well, actually, no, Mark was at Lutering too. Ryan was new to Carvana, but yeah, so yes, I think that is fair.
Yeah. So, I guess some people might say, hey, what's the big deal selling a car online? Anyone can put together a website and put a bunch of cars up there. But there's a lot of hard problems you have to solve, and I'll let you, of course, respond to that. But I don't know if Claudine is in the audience here, but she sent me an email a couple of years ago. I think at the time you were having problems with the DVA registrations, and she sort of asked me, Rob, what's up with this DVA stuff? All these cars, Carvana saying not registered. What's happening there? And I don't know whatever awakened the belief in her that I understood the DVA process, but I appreciate the trust my investors have in me. But anyway, tell us what it takes to sell a car online. What are the different steps?
There's so much. I'll try to make it concise, but I think buying a car correctly is hard. Cars are highly variable products with 100 describing features. Yeah, used cars in particular. There's 100 features that describe those cars, and then there's a bunch of those that are hard to measure, like condition from afar. So I think buying the car is hard. Then you've got the whole reconditioning process. We put about $1,000 of parts and labor into every car, and so the car goes through an inspection process. We figure out what needs to be fixed. That includes mechanical things. That includes cosmetic things. You got to build a process to do all that. And it's not like a normal manufacturing process because it's not, every widget doesn't need the same exact set of steps. They all need different steps. So it's kind of like a pseudo manufacturing process with wells where you pull cars out and do individual things. That's a complicated process to try to build. You have to build a transactional website because consumers are starting from a place of, I need to test drive a car. Like I buy a car once every 5 years. I need to make sure I get this right. They don't want to make a mistake. So you need to build a website that makes them feel confident and makes them feel like you're institutional enough to where they can trust the 7-day return policy, because a 7-day return policy is just a promise from a website. So they have to believe that that's real. You have to build out financing. That means credit scoring, pricing, loan structuring, figuring out like the combination of down payment and monthly payment that makes sense for that customer. You do have to do title and registration. Title and registration ends up, in theory, overlapping a lot with finance, because a lot of what title and registration is you're basically just trying to put a database entry in a state database that says this VIN belongs to this identity. But unfortunately, many of these state databases are very tired.
Antiquity.
Yeah, and so...
or even manual in some cases. I think.
Many times they're manual. Many of the document requirements are very, very burdensome. In certain counties, they'll require, if you want to put, your spouse on the title, you need to have like your marriage license. No one even knows what a marriage license is, but you have to have a physical copy of that. So it can get hard because you have to have all of these rules in a system, and you have to pull down all that data from a customer and then submit it to the DMV, who accepts it or rejects it, and you have to handle all that. And then you have to have last mile delivery to the customer's door, which is basically just a logistics network, except for this logistics network is moving multiple thousand-pound items.
You can't use UPS to transport.
And you can't use third parties because they don't. Third parties traditionally, there is like a third-party shipping network in the U.S., but it's dealer-facing, not consumer-facing. So they give you like we'll show up sometime between 7 and 14 days. They don't give you like a precise window, which isn't consumer-friendly.
Yeah, the titling is just a tiny part of the transaction, but it's like if that doesn't work, the whole transaction breaks down, and there's tons of things like that. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. That's where I think it's like, I do think when you're tackling these problems, sometimes it's better if you don't understand how hard they are. Like you need to be right that it's ultimately solvable, but I think think if you appreciate all the things that you have to do, you would be less likely to try.
Yeah, so just for Claudine's benefit, is the titling solved now, or is it a never-ending story?
I would say, just fun facts, there's one state that actually puts out public data about how often title work is submitted on time across all dealers, and that's about 70%. So that means a 30% error rate. Our error rate is far less than 10% of that error rate, and it was approximately equivalent to that error rate at the time that we were getting blown up in the media. So we were never that bad at it. We were approximately as bad as all other dealers. We are now way, way better than other dealers at it. Yeah. But it is a hard process because it can be county level.
Yeah. As a business person, there's there's also a sweet spot. You want problems to be hard because otherwise everyone can do them, but not so hard that you can't get it done. Which are the problems which you think are just basically going to be all the different parts of the value chain of getting a car sold? Which are the parts which is it's solved, it's easy, and which are the parts where it's basically there's always going to be room to improve it?
I think the more a process looks like something that just goes into a machine, the easier it is to get to a place where it is largely solved and scalable. The more the process requires organizing people or moving physical things, the harder the process fundamentally is, and the more work you inherently have to do, because even a process where you're moving things and organizing people, in theory, as you continue to automate more and more of the decision making, you make it look more and more like a machine, but it's sort of inherently further from a machine. So I think things like pricing cars, super scalable, very efficient today. I think things like reconditioning, we have a ton of work to do for a long time to keep making that more scalable and more efficient.
Yeah. So, and which part would you say is the most difficult today? There's so many different parts of the business with, shipping the cars in, reconditioning them, doing the underwriting the customers, getting them delivered, all that kind of stuff. Which is the stuff where you think there's the most sort of opportunity to improve?
I think there's opportunity to improve everywhere. I think in terms of difficulty, the things that make scaling the hardest, I think one is reconditioning, and I think inside of reconditioning, it's mostly cosmetic work, more so than mechanical work. I then think it's last mile logistics, then long leg logistics, and then basically the sum of what we call customer care, which is verifications for finance, registration, answering customer questions, things like that.
Yeah. Do you think any other company will ever be able to replicate this? I guess now you've shown it can be done, there would be a temptation for people to try and copy it. On the other hand, it's it was... Yeah. You almost didn't make it. So.
Yeah, will any company ever do it? Yeah. To me, there's this funny thing where if any group of people can do it, then another group of people can do it. So I do think that what you want is you want there to be the hardest set, sequence of things possible behind you. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of really, really hard things behind us. And then I think for anybody else deciding if they want to jump into that, I think that we've done our part to make sure they understand how hard it is, so they can look back at our history and they can say that looks pretty hard. But also as we find more success, they look at our success and they say, I want that, and so that becomes a bigger draw to take on the hard things. So I think we just got to keep running fast. I don't think you ever build anything where if you stop moving, no one's going to catch up to you. Yeah. So I think you just always got to run fast.
Yeah, I wrote a letter a few years ago talking about how we as investors love to find companies with competitive advantage, and that's a great thing. But the problem is the whole point of having a sort of competitive advantage is you get to sit back and people can't touch you because you have this wonderful moat around your business. So in a way you don't want the moat to be too wide because you want people to still be trying to improve the business, right?
Yeah, or you have to have that insecurity. I think it's funny because I think, especially investors, everyone in this room is probably a pretty rational person. So much of what actually makes the world move forward is emotional things that you can't quite articulate. And so I think that even that framing, it's completely right, but it's highly rational. It's okay, we kind of did it, we're sitting in front. But I think if you just have an emotional need to go tackle problems and an emotional need to win, and an emotional need to keep running fast, then that will power you, despite the fact that rationally maybe you're in a good spot.
Yeah. So should we talk about the crisis here?
Sure.
Let's do it.
There were several crisis years. You got to see one of them.
So you had this incredible growth trajectory all the way up until 22, and then like a ton of things all happened at once. You had the Omicron, and all kinds of things came together. So, why don't you give a quick recap for those who have already suppressed the memories of what happened in 22, and I'd love to hear from your perspective. What do you think were the mistakes you made, and what were the things which was just sort of bad luck or stuff out of your control?
So, there's like this. It's now a song by a guy named Baz Luhrmann. It's called the Sunscreen Song, but it was around the time that I graduated high school. It was a commencement speech, and one of the things he says is advice is a form of nostalgia. It's a way of taking the past out of like the dustbin, dusting it off, and recycling it for more than it's worth. And I think that's like an insanely wise statement, because I think everyone tells their story in retrospect in a way that serves their purpose. So I'll do my best to tell you the story, but I think unquestionably we're going to be subconsciously accidentally taking some liberties. But what I would say is I think Carvana is only a thing because we wanted to build something and we were really ambitious and aggressive, and I think that it always required scale to get to a spot where you could overcome the big fixed costs of building an e-commerce business. And so I think our aggression, like in sum total, served us very well, but we were aggressive in every possible way. We built the company quickly. We didn't raise as much money as people thought that we should. We were growing incredibly quickly. When we bought Odessa, which ends up being a big asset that's super valuable to us, we financed it with debt. So in every possible way, we were very aggressive.
Odessa is an auction house for those who aren't.
It's actually the auction house that I went to when I was supposed to try to save $1 million and got yelled at by the CEO of Drive Time. But so I think we were just tremendously aggressive that whole period. And in pre-going public, we had many near-death experiences, but then we kind of went public and we were like we were actually the worst IPO of 2017, but by 2018-19 we were thought of as an okay company, and then COVID hit and everyone thought we were dead, and then post-COVID they thought it was the only way to buy a car, and then we saw even more demand come our way and we were growing even faster, and we had plans for a massive growth year in 22, which was part of why we bought Odessa, which was going to help kind of build the infrastructure to enable us to grow faster. And I think the combination of all of those years of rapid growth, plus taking out the debt, plus like when Omicron hit, that was like this interesting moment in COVID where it was like the most virulent of all of the COVID strains. It also was kind of at that moment where people weren't yet sort of like living with it. And so it ended up causing tons of people to call out. So our logistics network basically broke down. Our inspection centers basically broke down. And we just got really rickety. And then all of a sudden investors, I think, went to this place where in my mind prior to that, we had enough success to where I thought that investors would look at all of our kind of unit economics and the trend lines and say, like, this is very clearly a business, and even if we hit a big bump, they would understand that it worked really well. But I think when we hit a bump that big, and when you paired that bump, where all of a sudden our unit economics got way worse with a bunch of debt, and then people are doing math, and they're like, you're gonna run out of cash, and then they're looking at the stock price, and they're like, but the stock price is down, so it's gonna be a lot of dilution, and then they just run that loop in their head over and over again. The stock price just completely collapsed and people basically thought we were dead. And I think what was hard about that is that then exacerbated the entire situation because we had been operating with a presumption that we had access to investor capital, and so we were okay losing money. And all of a sudden when investors basically, through our stock price said you no longer have access to investor capital, we had to also undergo a massive strategy shift to get to cash flow positive on our own very quickly because we did have like a clock ticking because we had this debt with a bunch of interest expense. Luckily, the business is good enough to where we were able to do that, and so we shrunk and we basically put all of our focus on just getting unit economics way better and none of our focus on growth, and got our unit economics to a way better place really quickly. I think we learned a ton of lessons through that, then now we're basically growing again very quickly, but we're doing it from a base where we're generating approximately twice the unit economics per transaction as most of our competitors, which is very different from where we were in 21. So we're now in a way better spot. But that aggression, like I wouldn't I wouldn't do it differently. Like, maybe if you could, have like all of your, wishes come true, would you not take out the debt and raise equity and then buy back equity when it was cheaper? Like, sure. But I think, being aggressive is part of what put us in a spot to have a chance to be successful and to build a business that was fundamentally good enough to where we could change the direction of our focus away from growth into unit economics and make a lot of progress really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a parallel universe which is totally realistic where you could have raised $5 billion before the crisis and you would have been like totally relaxed and we're totally fine and we don't need to do anything. And Carvana wouldn't be the business it is today.
Totally agree. Yeah, pressure is good even though it is not fun.
Yeah. I think everyone in the room here can attest to that. Yeah. One of the things that impressed me about that period was just the loyalty of the team. Why do you think that was? I have my answer to that, but I'll let you go first.
I think there's a number of things. I think a major thing is what is it that motivates people, I think is an important question. And I think different people are motivated in different ways. I do think that our team, and everyone's also motivated in like complex ways, so I don't want to over-reduce this, but I think our team for the most part, I think you can think of as more like a sports team. It's like, it's a competitive group of people that want to win, and there's that desire, I think, is much more robust, even though it sounds like sort of superficial, like you would like to have some like higher order intellectual set of motivations, but wanting to win is like pretty robust because it's most powerful in the moments when it's hardest, right? Like you're the most pissed off when you're losing. And so I think it's like a very powerful way to be motivated. And then I also think that, to like extend that team analogy, I think we're like loyal to each other because we've like been through stuff together, and that was true before that particular crisis. But it's just kind of the way that like the team is constructed. So I think that's part of it. I think being in Phoenix, which many of you probably don't know Phoenix, but Phoenix is, especially at the time, approximately the furthest thing in like a large city that you could be from like Silicon Valley. Like it's not where you would be expected to build a company like this. But what's nice about that is the people that you hire are not like mercenaries. They haven't switched between 10 companies before they got to you, which is funny because most investors want you to go get a bunch of people with pedigree that have done it before. But I think a byproduct of having done it before means that you're in an ecosystem where there's 1,000 alternatives, and if things get tough, people could disappear on you. So I think people hung together, and I don't know exactly why, but I think those are some of the reasons why.
Yeah, I think it's very unusual. Anastasius told us an anecdote last night where, to truncate the story a little bit, he said that he sort of asked ChatGPT whether Carvana has a founder as a CEO, and it said no, it doesn't. And he's like, no, wait about, isn't Ernie Garcia is the CEO of it? And ChatGPT said, yes, he is. So he goes, well, why did you just tell me it doesn't? It's because, well, it went through this massive crisis, and typically in a crisis, companies lose their CEO. So, so ChatGPT was kind of right in a way. But no, I think my answer to that question, and just to sort of give some background, I had this wonderful experience a couple of years ago where I flew to Phoenix, had a very nice meeting with you, and then the following day there was a tour of the Haines City IRC down in Florida. So I obviously took the one flight from Phoenix down to Orlando, and of course the whole of the Carvana IR team were on there. I see Mike and Austin in the audience there, and we really got to hang out, spend a lot of time together. I became an honorary member of the Carvana IR team for a couple of days, which was probably the pinnacle of my career, at least for now. But what I really felt through speaking with them and a lot of your other colleagues is just a deep love for you and a deep love for the mission, and that's an incredible credit to you.
Thank you. That's not what it is, though. But thank you.
Okay, so enough of crisis. You have an ambitious growth plan. You want to get to 3 million units, and the target is to do that within 5 or 10 years. And of course, everyone wants to know, is it going to be 5 or is it going to be 10? And one very smart or very stupid analyst on the last earnings call said something along the lines of, hey, Ernie, how on earth are you going to get to it in 5 years? You'd have to grow at 44% a year to do that, and this quarter you're only at 40. And you responded, God damn it.
I didn't say God damn it. I said something very nice.
Yeah. We need to grow at 41, and we grew at 44. So I think you sort of you revealed your preference for the 5 versus 10 years. But why don't you tell us a bit about that plan and what you need to get there?
Yeah, so I think I think, first of all, to put it in context, in the U.S., 40 million used cars are sold every year. And so, like 3 million is actually not a super ambitious number relative to most other retail verticals. That'd be 7.5% market share. And most retail verticals have someone who has a 20 or 30% market share and someone who has about half of that. I do think because of like the origin story we talked about before, in automotive it's been highly fragmented and there's been no economies of scale for that business. I think our business is a business that is very scalable, is superior in unit economics, and also has very significant economies of scale. So we're, I think, the first business in automotive that has a chance to build, very large market shares. And if I allow myself to dream, I think I can dream of bigger market shares than other verticals, and I could give you reasons why I think that's possible. But I think 3 million is a goal where we said, okay, let's look at what our market shares are in the markets that we're currently in, because we generally have this property where the markets we've been in for longer have higher market shares than our average market share across all markets. And so we can look at that and we can see how they're growing, and we can extrapolate a bit, and then we can look at some of the positive feedback in the business. We know that when you double inventory, you increase the propensity for a customer to buy a car because the odds that they find the car they're looking for go up. And so you can think about okay, as all these other markets catch up to the older markets, that alone drives a bunch of sales growth. That sales growth then flows into larger inventories. Those larger inventories flow into higher conversion back to the original group, so you can kind of see how that feedback loop cycles. Same thing happens with marketing and with logistics. And we said, okay, 3 million feels like a very achievable goal. And then we said, okay, what do we think we can achieve that in from a timeline perspective? And it's interesting because I think there's at least two ways to approach that problem. One way is to say, what do we think that we can build ourselves, and what do we think is the rate at which we can expand the underlying operational system that is necessary to serve that many customers, and do we think demand is there? And the other thing that you can do is you can say, let's look at business history, because in the same way that we may not have totally appreciated or foreseen how hard it was going to be to build Carvana, it's hard to know all the difficult things that are going to show up as you try to grow quickly. And business history at least gives you lots of examples that you can look at to try to get a sense for what's possible. And so I would say that the 40%, which equates to 5 years, is in my personal optimistic sense, which you have to understand, you should interpret everything I say through the lens that I am an optimist, but I believe it's super, super achievable in terms of what we can do. And then I think that business history at our scale suggests that, something more like 20 is definitely achievable. And so I think it was kind of okay, let's put that range out there and let's be ambitious and let's go fast, but it's helpful to organize the company around a bigger goal, because I think, compounding is very powerful, and it can be easy for many people inside the company, if you don't quantify what the goal is going to be, to at any point in time think wow, growing by 50% would be so great. And I think, at the time that we put that out there, we were probably run rating around 400,000 or 50,000 sales. And so, 3 million can sound really far away, even though it's not a crazy growth rate compounded, 5 or 10 times. So we wanted to make sure that we were articulating that to everyone so we could build systems that would support it.
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat as well that I'm also an optimist, I just think, and it's not an original thought, but, the experience of selling a car and buying a car is such a terrible one. Formative experience for me is, I had to sell a used car in Switzerland. And Switzerland's a very wealthy country, but it's a very backward country in terms of the internet, because it's too small for the big guys to really bother to build a business here. So the way you sell a car here is you sort of put it up on an internet, and then all of a sudden all these sort of dodgy people start phoning you up to try and buy it. And about 10 years ago, I found myself behind the main station in Zurich, which is where all the kind of the sort of the dodgy transactions take place. Normally not cars, more illicit substances, I would guess. But there I was behind the station, and there was this guy peeling off these sort of 500 franc or 1,000 franc notes to me, and Rob, what wrong turns did I take in life? I've got this dodgy guy peeling off notes to me behind the main station. But that was my experience of selling a car, and I don't think that the buying experience is any better. So I mean, in my very optimistic view, I don't think there's a reason for anyone not to buy a car online, ideally for Carvana. Or am I being too optimistic there?
I think you're spot on. I wouldn't change a thing.
Probably preaching to the choir a little bit there. And it's not just used cars. You've also now started to flirt with selling new cars. Anything you can tell us about that?
I would say new cars we're being very coy about, and so please forgive us, but I think we're just starting. It's super early, and we're trying to kind of learn it as we go, and I think we want to talk about things we're very confident about, so we'll stick to used.
Yeah, I know you don't want to talk about it, and that's totally fine, but just from like a conceptual level, I think there's a lot of regulation in the US. You have to have a state, you have to have a dealer in a state, and so there's like 50 odd states, whatever the number is, and there's 10 plus brands. Does that mean theoretically you would have to have effectively a sort of a dealership network to sell new cars, or do you think there may be a way to sort of get around that?
I would just say at a high level, I think the regulatory structures around new and used are not dramatically different, but there are differences. I think the more important thing that we've got to figure out is new a good business for us, and can we figure out how to do that well from a consumer perspective? I don't think rules are going to be the thing that stop us.
Yeah, and also I guess there was no rules for Uber and Airbnb and those kind of companies, so you have to maybe skate to where the puck is potentially going to be in 5 years' time, and not where it is today. Yeah.
I'm trying to get off this topic.
Yeah, that's we understand. That's my final question on the topic. Let me see how we're doing for time here. We're exactly on the quarter of 9:45, so I'm going to open it up for questions. So I have two helpers with the microphones, my daughter Olivia and my son Tommy. Where's Tommy? Andrea, you're not Tommy, but you can have the first question. Have one at the front here. A round of applause for the capable microphone people.
Wonderful. We touched before on AI tailwinds for the business. I would be curious to hear more about where you see the benefits of that for Carvana, and maybe give us a sense of what is the kind of cost base on which these efficiencies could be applied to. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I'll say I think my hope is that AI clearly can help us reduce costs like all over the place. I think my hope is that it also helps us build simpler experiences for customers that increase conversion. I think that there's way more gains to be had there. And I think that even goes back to like the fundamental concept of like trying to reduce information to make it easy for a customer to be confident. And AI is very good at taking lots of information and reducing it down and making it simple and answering the specific questions a customer has. So my hope is with a lot of those tools will not only reduce cost but increase conversion. Before I go on this long rant, I will also caveat it with again, I'm optimistic. So again, all of you guys should take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I think that we're positioned to really benefit dramatically from AI. And I think the reason is because the first sort of thing that happens when there's a new tool set is a business in theory gets better. Maybe it's through cost reduction, maybe it's through higher conversion. The next thing that happens is every business they compete with gets better in the same ways, and then the market is competitive, and so those gains get competed away to some degree. And so I think what's unique about us is I think, one, we have a complex system, which means that there are lots of opportunities for AI. Two, that complex system is completely deterministic. So every decision made in that system is made by us and is made in a way that can be calculated ahead of time. We compete with a system that is not deterministic. We compete with a system where the vehicle price is negotiated, the rate is negotiated. There are many humans inside the system that are making a bunch of decisions, and as a result, it's much harder to just access an API and turn all that information to something that a consumer can consume and go through themselves. We accumulate a lot more data than the rest of our peers because we're vertically integrated. So we've got the data throughout the whole transaction. And that's more important than it sounds, because to a consumer, the vertical integration isn't really a thing. They just want to buy a car and they need a monthly payment. So it may be a thing for a retailer and a finance company to want to be different businesses because they focus in different areas. But for the consumer, that's one thing. I'm going to make a monthly payment to buy my car. And so you need to reduce all that to make it very simple for them. And to do that, you need to have information transfer between those things that's complete, so that a customer can get a complete answer. So I think we've got access to that as well. And so to me, what's exciting is I think that we have many properties about our business relative to the competition that just put us in a position to benefit from all of these tools more than they are likely to benefit from them. And then also relative to our competition, we have a culture of having built everything inside of our business and all the technology inside of our business, whereas our competition has a culture of having purchased 30 third-party software tools. So I think that we're very well positioned to benefit from the cost reduction, from the conversion increases, from the speed benefits that you get by just being able to develop things faster. And then I think some of the things that maybe are additional extrapolations of where AI is taking us, things like driverless cars, which is maybe something we could hit later if you guys want to. But I think before there's super widespread adoption of driverless cars, there's going to be driverless trucks. And one of the trade-offs inherent in our business is traditional dealers invest in real estate, we invest in logistics to get cars to customers. And so if things like logistics become less expensive, in that trade-off, we benefit and our competition does not. So I think there are many things that put us in a position to not only benefit, but also to have those benefits not competed away. But all of that will take time. And I think, like everything, we're hustling as fast as we possibly can to try to get the benefits of all those things today. And I would like to think we're doing a pretty good job, but it's very early in building all of those new capabilities.
Yeah, for me, the key point there is it's just very difficult for other people to copy that.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next? Do you want to stand up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Earlier, Ernie, you referred to scaling and refurbishment. Could you elaborate a little bit on, what is easiest to scale in refurbishment and what's hardest, and maybe rank it and talk a little bit about, about the dimensions to it?
Yeah. So, I think where it's easiest today is through our acquisition of Odessa, we purchased enough real estate to where we now have the real estate owned and in our system to produce 3 million cars per year. We've made the additional CapEx investments in that real estate to get us to about 1.5 million cars per year. And so the additional investments mean buildings and lifts and the things that you need to make sure that you're able to actually build all those cars. We're currently run rating about 600,000 cars per year. So, when you go, real estate is one layer, then it's the CapEx on top of the real estate, and then it's the actual hiring and training of people and at building those cars. At that level, we're about 600,000 today. So I think, moving forward, if we put it in the context of this 3 million goal, we've already got the real estate, so that's great. The CapEx is an undertaking, but it's, you just need a plan and you got to spend the money and you've got to, hire the groups and buy the things and have them installed. I think it's much more about the hiring, the training, and then just the ongoing execution. And so, I could dive into all those for a while, but I think none of those are fundamentally difficult problems. They're all just difficult because they're not build a system that works and then turn the system on and then turn the knob on the system. All of that is, you're constantly hiring people and training people and you're constantly managing those people and the processes that they're running. And so I think that it's, the people and just managing the ongoing process part is hard. And then I alluded earlier to cosmetic generally being a constraint. People always ask us, do EVs change the answer for reconditioning? Do they make it a more or less valuable function? Which is a good question, but most of the work approximately half of the work that is done to get a car ready for a customer is actually just cosmetic work. Because if you were backing out of your driveway and you got a door ding, you live your life with that. That's just part of your car. It's no big deal. If you spilled your coffee and tore some of the upholstery on the inside, you live your life with that. But when you're going to buy your next car, all of a sudden those two things are completely unacceptable. And so you have to make sure that every car that you purchase gets those things done. And that can include, banging out dents, it can include paint, it can include upholstery finishes. That ends up being the part that I think is, it's the hardest to hire for and train for and the hardest to retain, because it's, there's many different jobs people can take once they have that skill set, that are kind of more like individual proprietorships that allow them to make a lot of money. And so I think that's probably the single hardest part, but you're moving a lot of stuff and you're managing a lot of people, so it's inherently hard.
Okay, I think there was someone at the back there, yeah. And then we have one at the front here, yeah. Not working? Maybe we go straight to the other microphone and we come back. Is it working? Sorry, get that? Is the other microphone going?
Hello?
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good. Good.
So, this is Kuna. So, you explained before how you went from a strategy of burning money to grow to a strategy of printing money to grow. And what would it take for you to change course and decide, okay, I really want to grow fast. I I want to burn money and grow much faster than I have. What emotions do you need to have to change course?
And you're saying what would cause us to change now, or what causes us to change before?
No. What would it take for you to go back and say, I'm going to burn money to grow much faster?
Well, luckily, we're in a good spot now where we're producing around $4,000 of EBITDA per transaction versus our competitors that are producing around $1,500 to $2,000. It would be hard to invest enough money to go back to burning cash, at least in this environment. And I think that the natural thing that would occur if you did that is it would generate so much demand that you would be unable, with our current processes, to handle it on the scaling side. So I think the way that we're trying to do it today is, we're generating margins now that are probably, a couple points shy of our long-term goal. Getting to our long-term goal is largely just about leveraging the fixed costs that we've already got. But then in every part of the transaction, every GPU line item, every cost line item, we're talking about AI and all these different things, there's opportunity in every single one of those different line items. So our goal over the next several years is keep getting better in all those line items. As a general matter, kind of keep growing and let our fixed cost leverage that gets us to our margin target. And then as we improve in all these different line items, hand that back to customers to continue to power even more demand growth. And I think that's the play that we're going to try to run. And I think that if we do that and we get to 3 million in 5 years, I think we'll be pretty happy with that. And I think it'll be without historical precedent for a business of this. Well, for almost any business, but for a business of this complexity, certainly. So I think that's our goal today. We're hoping to kind of have our cake and eat it too, is our general goal there.
Who's next? Just
Hi. Even though the US market and the European market are, I would say, a little bit different in the way they sell used cars. Like the only company I can think of which does something comparable here on the European continent would be the Auto One Group. Can you see any analogies to them, even though they are more focused on the B2B transactions and on the auctions? I think they are the only company I can think of which does something similar.
Yeah. I think, so first of all, I don't want to overstate my knowledge of that business, but I would say I think they started, we started on opposite sides of the same problem. They started buying cars from customers and selling them to dealers, and we started buying cars from dealers and selling them to customers. But because the fundamental is that the used car market is basically just consumers trading with each other. The cars are already manufactured, they're already being driven in the world. It's just one customer gets tired of their car and wants to trade with another customer somewhere else. And then the entire auto industry exists to answer that problem. Once you have one of those chains, it's natural to build the other chain. So, we around 2018, 19 started to invest in buying cars from customers. And now we've got kind of both chains that are overlapping. And I think they probably in 21, give or take, started to invest in more of the retail side. I think it's highly analogous. But what I would also say though is, I think, and I think they've done a good job, and they're enjoying success. So please don't take what I say now to be like a backhanded comment about them. But I think, to me, the idea is not the hard part. There's Kazoo, there's Kavak in South America, there was Vroom in the US, there's Clutch in Canada. There's been 15 or so, or maybe 20 swings at businesses that are very similar to Carvana internationally. And I think that so far, we've been lucky to be the most successful, and our stock went down 99% in the middle. And so to me, I think it's more about trying to just solve that Rubik's Cube as you're going than it is knowing what Rubik's Cube to solve. And so I think it's the complexity of the undertaking that ends up being the hard thing, and it turns into an execution problem.
Yeah, maybe I can chime in there as well. I mean, I remember there's this anecdote about, someone wants to build this pedestal with a monkey on the top that reads Shakespeare, and the sort of the joke is, don't start with a pedestal, which is the easy part, focus first on teaching a monkey to read. And, my sense on a lot of these other businesses, they really started with the easy part of the business, but we were talking earlier, you really need the whole chain to make the transaction work. So I think they've got a lot of work still cut out for them, but you probably don't want to comment on that. So.
Yeah, I think, we have a lot of work cut out for us too. It's a hard business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thomas.
Yeah, first of all, I want to to say thank you because Carvana was my best stock so far.
Okay, good. Well, I want to say thank you too, and I'm sorry for the ride you probably went on.
My question is, what did you learn from dealing with stress and resilience from encountering a 99% drawdown? Like, did you meditate or did you...
That's probably more of a question for me.
He has a lot of responsibility and like, what did you take it like one small step at a time, or did you think the market got it completely wrong, so your conviction never wavered?
Man, there's a lot to that. I would say, let me tell you the thing that I think is most important. I think, like, what is stress? I think Jeff Bezos has an interesting concept around his definition of what stress is. He basically says that it's your subconscious knowing that you're supposed to make a decision that you haven't yet made. I think that there's like a lot of truth to that. And then I think the next part of stress is when like your identity is brought into question. I think that like when you like that's like the deepest form of human stress that you can feel is when you like start to question who you are, basically. And I think we felt very good about the decisions that we had made to begin with, and I think we were pretty quick about making the decisions about what we needed to do, once we got going. And then I think, like, going back to that motivation, like, this wasn't about having other people think that we're great. You know what I mean? Like success, and I don't want to like say that's not nice in certain ways, but like that wasn't what it was about. It was about like, we're too old to play sports now, let's go try to win a different game. And it was like, it was about that competition, I think. And so I don't think for most of us, our identity was ever brought into question. It was more just like it pissed you off. Like, okay, like people don't believe in us, let's go prove that they're wrong. And then what I'll also say is I think, this is something that I wouldn't have planned. And I think that the truth of long-term relationships is that you see the absolute worst in each other. So I hate to give my wife any credit at all, but my wife truly does not care about Carvana. Like, she does not. And I think that that's like a massive blessing, because I think that, like, I can go home after a horrible day and it's just like I have got my life with my kids and my wife, and it's a totally different thing. And it's not like, she's not focused on going to the cocktail party because, Carvana did this amazing thing and now we get to go hang out and be part of society. Like, she doesn't care. And I think that that's really important too. So I don't know. Those are like the best answers that I can give.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. And I have a similar one. Is when I started my company, because capital was very short, I started working from home more out of necessity, as opposed to some great strategic plan just to keep costs low. But it really helped me to sort of stay even-minded and relaxed, just having my wife and our kids there who don't even know what a stock market is.
Which is the greatest thing in the world. Yeah, good for them.
So we have time for one last question, and then I have a very tiny question at the end for Ernie. So who's going to take the last one? We've had a lot from that corner, so let me see if we can offer some. Let me see. Alex, why don't you take the last one? Sorry, but all of the questions seem to have come from that area, so I want to make sure everyone else has a chance. I noticed just before you start, Alex, it felt like 100 hands just went up there. Ernie will be here this afternoon and at the dinner this evening, and if he's still got a voice by the time he leaves tomorrow, you guys haven't done your job. So.
Yes, thank you for giving me the last question. What a responsibility. A car at the end is a pretty inefficient personal asset. I mean, it's driven only 30 miles a day on average, and it sits there, and it happens to me, I'm in the office and I think, oh, my car is sitting there, it's worth so much. So do you foresee a different system in the future where we have like fractional ownership or Airbnb for cars, and could that impact somehow your business?
Yeah, so I think that's that sort of gets back to this question of does autonomy lead to like a shift in car ownership models to something that's more like fleet-like? Basically, is like the core question there. And I'll tell you that I don't think so, and then I'll acknowledge that it would be worse for us if that happens. So I've got like a dog in the fight, and then I'll tell you why I don't think so. So the reason I don't think so is because Cars do, like what you said is exactly the best way to articulate why there should be more fleet ownership, right? Like the car is massively underutilized, but you described it in time, right? You described like the car's sitting there, I'm at the office, the car's sitting there doing nothing. The reality is cars actually depreciate a lot more in mileage than they depreciate in time. If you look at like, for example, all the new car manufacturers are putting out their 26 model years for the last 4 or 5 months. Those cars are going to trade at the exact same price for the next 12 months. They're going to barely depreciate at all because they have no miles accumulating, but they're going to be sitting on dealer lots and selling for the same price for the next 12 months. So when you look at data and you try to basically say, like, I'm going to look at all the variation in car outcomes, and I'm going to try to separate out how are cars depreciating in time versus depreciating in mileage, the vast majority of the actual depreciation takes place in mileage. That's where you get the door dings and where you get the rips in the upholstery and all the things that someone wants to fix. And so then you also can go look at all these fleets. You can look at Uber and you can say, let me look at Uber in a relatively densely packed area like New York. Let me look at Uber in an area that's way less dense. And you look at actual utilization of these different fleets, and you tend to get numbers that look like something between 50 and 70% utilization. What that then means is if you're going to consume a mile from a fleet, that fleet is actually going to drive somewhere between 1.5 and 2 miles for every mile that you consume. So if you kind of imagine 2 ways to consume miles, one way is you own the car and one way is you rent from a fleet. In the place where you own the car, you're going to be paying more time-based depreciation, but you're going to be paying for exactly X miles. And you're not going to be paying fleet profit. In the case where you have a fleet car, you're going to be paying 1.5 to 2x on your miles. You're going to be paying way less time-based depreciation, but you're going to be paying a profit to the fleet owner. And when you can build that in a model that's 10 or 20 cells, and then you can start to convert that into what actually means something to a person, which is what is my monthly expense to consume 1,000 miles, give or take. And you get to a place where you realize it's highly possible that people will actually save money by owning even an autonomous car than by consuming it out of a fleet. And if it is cheaper to consume it out of a fleet, it will likely be tens of dollars. It will likely not be big dollars. And then you start to think about but people have pride of personal ownership and they have like car seats in the car and they've got their golf clubs and they've got their stuff. It's like a rolling locker. It's all these things that it means to people. So I personally, like I said, I've got a dog in the fight, but I think it is much more likely that as we make progress in autonomy, it will not change the ownership model much. And I think that the places where you get way bigger savings would be if the entire world shifts around the car, where all of a sudden you buy apartments where you don't need to pay for parking spots. But that's like a massive infrastructure problem. The world is already constructed in the way it's constructed, so I think those sorts of changes would likely take a very, very long time. So I don't think so, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is a world with AI is a much wealthier world, and people love to own things. There's no reason to have a second home, but a lot of people do. And I think people will love having a car which is exactly to their specifications available when they want it. And,
I like that.
We could go on forever, but I'm going to draw a line there. Ernie, thank you so much. Andreas, my partner's wife, has a small but flourishing chocolate business here in Switzerland, Osana. If you're based in Switzerland, you can order on her website, some unashamed product placement there. But here's some chocolates.
Wow, and it's boxed beautifully.
You should get a photo of that. And Ernie, thank you so much. I'm going to finish with one last question.
Yes, sir.
Does the march go on?
The march always goes on. You're always marching. You're never done marching. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie.